All right, guys. I'm going to title this video, Everything is Not a Test, and Everything is Not a Humiliation Ritual. You know, if you've been watching these motivational videos online, it's normally by somebody that's a charismatic speaker. They'll have music playing in the background telling you to keep pushing over and over again. If you've watched that type of content, this video is for you. I want to preface myself first. I stayed in toxic environments way longer than I should have, thinking that the longer that I stayed, that it would be some grand reveal, it would be a breakthrough, and that I was being resilient. You know, I've listened to all the content, read all the books about how you should be stronger, and that makes sense. You should be, you know. Quite often, one common talking point that you'll listen to if you listen to motivational videos, they'll always tell you there's somebody out there willing to work harder than you and willing to, would love to get in a situation that you're in. And that's true if you're applying that to some endeavor you're doing in your personal life. However, when you're dealing with an organization such as a company, you're not just dealing against one person who's willing to work harder than you. You're dealing with a whole system, a whole organized system that may be structured in such a way where it's not intended for you to thrive, and maybe it's done there and they don't want you to, because that's the type of culture. I've seen some cases where, even I was a supervisor, had supervisory positions, and they would tell us like, hey, this worker here is excelling, he's too good, but are what they're bringing to the team, they're polluting the environment. It sucks too, because you find yourself where you have to shrink yourself just to fit into that environment. If they're looking at it from the vantage point like, if we got to keep dealing with this jealousy from the other workers while this one person is totally right, we don't have the time or the resources to get everybody to see that this one person is not the problem. So they may begin looking at you, the chosen one or the motivated person, is the risk. You always keep that, but in some situations it'll get weaponized. So, as I said, I wanted to take this chosen one narrative, a motivational standpoint, and I wanted to add something different to it, to see how some of the thoughts change how I see all of this. There's this popular narrative that says like, hey, if you're chosen or if you're special, you're supposed to be able to endure anything. The harder it gets, the more you're supposed to stay. And a lot of people are even calling every bad situation a humiliation ritual or some type of spiritual test. But here's my perspective. I'm going to give you an analogy on a couple movies. If you looked at the Karate Kid, there was a time when Daniel, he decided he wanted to train with Cobra Kai and learn some type of quicksilver technique. The instructors start having him do these painful, um, what he thinks is exercises to make him feel pain, to make him feel stronger. He was telling Daniel, hit the wood, hit it, punch it. And the whole time he was busting his knuckles, his hands were bloody, and the guy was back there laughing at him as he was tearing himself apart, thinking that he was making himself stronger. Some environments that you get into, like what I saw on certain jobs. Suppose if they wanted to like get rid of a lot of people, it may have been because you may have been too competent. It may have been you may have made somebody feel threatened. And they'll purposely start placing these things around you to get you to start going harder and harder and harder so that you end up destroying yourself. You know, to give you another example, there was this other movie called Whiplash, how you would have this instructor was tearing apart the students psychologically. They were thinking that they were building themselves up, but what he was actually doing is contaminating their motivation and their gifts. You know, when you stay in toxic environments too long, we'll tell ourselves, hey, I'm being resilient, thinking that it's good for you. But sometimes you slowly just, not only injuring yourself physically, you end up creating a lot of cognitive dissonance in between your mind and in your body. And let me say this clearly: if you've been enduring difficult situations, your resilience is real and it's commendable. The fact that you can take so much and keep going shows that you have real strength. But here's where we have to be honest. A lot of people are using the motivation and chosen one content as a crutch, even taking advice from content creators who are not really therapists, who keep telling you to endure more and more, and it doesn't really benefit you all the time. And it's a shame because if you happen to find yourself in this position where it seems like people around you are attacking you because of your happiness and your gifts, it means that you've outgrown that environment, and that it's time to change said environment to either like minded people who are also high achievers, where you guys can create this ecosystem where you can feed off of each other and push each other, and you can push each other to achieve even higher heights. But what I've seen is that sometimes we'll shrink into an environment thinking that if we continue to push forward, we'll get stronger. But the problem is, I would say, why cast your pearls before swine? If you're not careful, that gift you have for hard work, that natural happiness, that natural quirkiness you have about yourself, if you stay in the wrong environment too long, it can end up killing parts of your psyche and killing parts of yourself. And if you're not careful, the gifts that you have can easily get contaminated and it can easily get perverted. Then there's this thing where we think that as long as we are putting up with suffering or unpleasant feelings, that all automatically signifies growth. And I don't believe just staying in an environment because it's uncomfortable is actually strengthening you. I just can't see it. Many cases where I've been in environments myself where I realized it either something changed, that I should have gotten out of it, that the environment had become so hostile that I really wasn't thriving. I really was just surviving in that environment. And it didn't bring out the best in me. The environment didn't challenge me. It didn't bring out the best of me. If anything, it ended up stripping away parts of myself that I had to take some time and do work to recover. And real spiritual growth isn't about how much abuse you can endure. Sometimes it's measured in how well you protect and direct the gifts that you have been given. Because if you have an environment that's purposely trying to pick away at what you have. You can't focus your energy on becoming the best version of yourself because you would find yourself in an environment where you're doing these Jedi mind tricks on yourself and you're not focused on your work. You're not focused on your craft. You're just getting more disruptions into your patterning and your good traits. If you find yourself where, your algorithm will tell you a lot about yourself if the only thing you're looking at is your doom scrolling. I understand we won't, if you're doom scrolling, chosen one type of content, if you feel where you're always under attack, that's probably your nervous system telling you, hey, you need to do something because your nervous system can become dysregulated. And that, we look at these videos about people who say they can just endure everything. We see stories about people. If you read some of Solzhenitsyn's writings, how people they survived the gulags and different type of POW camps and POW camps, which are to the extreme. And most of those people who actually survived, who's to say that they actually survived the best version of themselves, but they may have survived as a fragmented version of their best selves. Sometimes you have to everything is not always a test by God or the universe. Sometimes it's just gaslighting, real talk. And every environment that you get in, it's not it doesn't mean you're going to have to stay there for your whole life. And sometimes if you, the best way to win is to not play the game. And if you've detected that the environment is outward, most people that deal with this chosen one type of narrative is oftentimes dealing with jobs or people that you're interacting with on the social level. This means that you have a chance to leave said environment. Here's another thing. If you're dealing with an environment, if the soil is clearly contaminated, if you take your good seeds, meaning your skills, your talents, your your psyche, your idiosyncrasies and things like that that make you uniquely you. You'll have talents and skills that nobody else has, or introspection or a type of energy that you bring about yourself. And if you take that energy and you plant it into bad soil, polluted soil will never produce good fruit. You know, if sometimes you have to get away from an environment. And knowing to get away from an environment, it's not quitting, it's wisdom, and to knowing what your worth is, and to be careful that we're not projecting positive. We project it when positivity gets to be toxic, where you project positivity on a bad situation or on people who are clearly trying to destroy you. So that's my take on it. Thank you for watching.